Call the meeting to order. Ask for a roll call.
Belsley.
Here.
Blunier.
Here.
Hare.
Here.
Lehman.
Here.
Newman.
Here.
Parrott.
Here.
We have a quorum.
If you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There is no public hearing tonight. Presentation, special reports. We will have one coming up for our state champion ladies basketball dynasty. So congratulations to them. Any public comment? Anybody in the audience like to make a comment? If not, the consent agenda tonight is the approval of the minutes, the regular meeting February 18th, 2018, and the approval of the bills.
So moved. Second.
Any comments? Call the roll.
Belsley.
Yes.
Blunier.
Yes.
Hare.
Yes.
Lehman.
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
Parrott.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. I have nothing tonight. Village clerk,
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
village administrator.
I have one minor item tonight, Your Honor. We're going to start off with an overview of the budget for the upcoming fiscal year beginning May 1st, 2019, running through April 30th, 2020. As you can see on the summary page of the overall budget, this budget is actually a deficit overall of $5.7 million. That is mainly due to some estimated costs that we are working on for the upgrade of the water treatment system. We currently are budgeting $7 million for that. So that is the main cause of the deficit of the $5.7 million. That money would be spent out of revenue that we have kept back in reserve from prior years. So it would not be anything at the current time that we would have to finance. We probably will look at that, but it's not a necessary financial item that we would have to do. The second page there just is a summary of all the income, revenues, streams, expenses, and net surplus deficit for each fund. As you can see, the general fund is currently budgeted to be just a minor deficit of $15,000 for the upcoming fiscal year. As you can see, going down, the total of the enterprise funds is approximately a $5 million deficit. The special revenue funds are also a deficit of 1.7, and then the pension funds are a surplus of $988,000. But overall, that is lending to the overall deficit of $5.7 million for the upcoming fiscal year. And just a summary of the capital improvements that are included in the budget. There is $13.4 million in capital improvements in this budget. $1.9 million is in the general fund for street improvement projects, and $250,000 for a new ambulance to replace a 2004 unit. Water system, like I spoke again earlier, the $7 million for the upgrade to the water treatment system. The storm water fund has got $543,000 for system upgrades. The business district fund has got $425,000, which is for potential land purchases and projects including sidewalk replacement and street improvements. And then in the motor fuel fund, tax fund, we are budgeting $1.8 million for capital for the upcoming year. $200,000 of that is for salt purchases, and then street overlay projects of $1.6 million. Under the general fund, this is a pretty conservative increase in revenues budgeted of 1.9%. That has been pretty much how the revenues have seemed to trend in the last few years. It's not taking into account any potential budget effects from the state budget. I know there are a few things that have been mentioned in the state level. And Craig has mentioned a few things of what they're doing with fees and fines for, you know, if you get a traffic ticket and that type of thing, that they're cutting our share of that too. So those things have not been taken into account in here. We'll have to look at that more when the state gets a little more detailed, hopefully prior to our appropriations in July. And pretty much on the general fund, expenses appear to be pretty stable from this year currently to the next fiscal year. The water and sewer fund, basically we're back at the, of course, the $7 million budget for the upgrade. This budget also is including a 5% increase in water and sewer fees to customers, which would generate approximately just over $400,000 a year for that increase. We're hoping to do this and build up some of the surplus for the anticipated improvements that we saw when we had the presentation a couple weeks ago on the projects that we're going to be needing to do over the next 20 years. In the 911 Consolidated Center Fund, I just wanted to highlight, since this will actually be like the first year for that operations, I budgeted a rent of $14 a square foot. It's kind of a middle ground of what we think and what we would like. The expenses will be a prorated share of just maintenance and utilities. So we're looking at possible net of about $24,000 a year net income basically for that. That money, once whatever's netted at the end of the year, I'm anticipating we will transfer back to the general fund to pay for the construction of the facility. We are not looking at this time to finance that construction, mainly because the rents that we're looking to get would not be sufficient to pay for the actual cost of financing it. So it would have to be surplus money taken from other funds anyway. So rather than do that, we're looking to just take it from reserves up front and not pay any interest on the monies. Business district, as I said before, we're looking to do some infrastructure improvements, and $150,000 is budgeted for potential land purchases, and $75,000 is budgeted for land improvement projects. Motor fuel tax, as I said before, we're budgeting $200,000 for salt purchases and $1.6 million for overlay. And Craig may be able to give you a little more synopsis on this than I can, but pretty much what I'm understanding is what we're budgeting for overlay work is significant, but it will hopefully get us closer to being where we really should be as far as maintaining our streets. It's not going to get us to where we should be, but it's going to get us closer. We put aside overlay projects in the last few years that we are going to try to catch up on. And I don't know if Craig wants to add anything to that. But
I think we can discuss it under mine.
Okay.
I've got the resolution here. A little
Okay.
bit, so.
And then I described down here below, once we expend that type of money out of this fund, we'll be left with about $1 million in reserves in our motor fuel tax fund. Those, we have future plans for that money, including the $450 approximate revenue we get per year for that, for the planned expansion of the Cortlandt Street in 2021 and 2022 of approximately $1 million. We'll continue to do the annual salt purchases of $200,000, and then the planned expense for Morton's share of the Main and Jackson intersection revision of approximately $250,000 sometime in the next 5 years. And then the rest of the presentation is just a graphical representation. The first one is our revenues by funds for the entire village. Just giving, like, as you can see, the general fund is 37%. The water and sewer fund is approximately 22%, and the gas fund is approximately 25%, and then the rest of them are single-digit percentages of our revenues. Expenses are pretty much mirrored, other than the water, effect of the water treatment capital. They pretty much mirror the revenues. 31% general fund expenses, 19% gas fund, and 35% this upcoming year of the expenses will be for the water and sewer fund. The last overall graphic is the expenditures by type. 28% of our expenditures is for personnel and including salaries, medical benefits, retirement. 38% is for capital outlay, and 27% is for our contractual, our utilities, those types of things that we have to purchase. And then I just wanted to give you the overall representation on the general fund, since break down the revenues. 61% of our revenues are from intergovernment revenues. That's sales tax, use tax, state income tax, replacement tax, communications tax, grants, and they make up the biggest chunk of the revenue that's taken in by the general fund. So property taxes are in the blue triangle, the 13%, the 1.4 million. And then we have licenses and permits and other services, which are mainly made up of our ambulance revenue, and then other smaller items that we have as far as revenue on the general fund. So you can see, as the state affects their revenue, our share of revenues, basically, that has a huge impact on our general fund because it makes up 61% of what we take in. The next one is expenditures by type. As I did for the overall, this is just for the general fund. 50% of the general fund expenditures are for personnel, 22% capital outlay, and 19% is for contractual. And then by department, if you look, 34% of the budget is made up of expenditures for the street department, 32% is made up by the police department, and then 16% is made up by the paramedics, and then the rest of them are single-digit percentages. I just wanted to, I gave each one of you a detailed report on the budget, mainly for your consideration from here, between here and the next meeting, because at the next meeting, unless I hear a lot of information that you want changed, we will probably move to approve the budget at the next meeting.
I'd just like to make a few comments. It's probably the first year that the general fund, which expends 11 million, that we've been anywhere close to balance. It's usually $1 million or $2 million off at this time. It's within 14,000. We have a one-time ability to take about $1.8 million of motor fuel tax, and Craig can allowed on it, but we're trying to gain on our street program, which we didn't spend any money for new blacktop last year. But once we do it, we're down to just salt for the next 3 years because of the projects already promised. In the last 4 years, between 2 years, 1 year of deficits and 3 years of final income, the general fund gained $1,080,000. The staff, and I'll compliment Julie, she's come up that we're going to pay for the police addition of approximately close to $900,000 out of that. So by paying for the police station now and not borrowing money, we have used up the 4 years of gains. But we're still out of debt for the time being. But you're not going to be able to do this amount of road projects every year because we're using the 1.8 million. But reserves are for reserves and to be used for the benefit of the citizens. So that $1,080,000 gain that we've showed in 4 years, in 1 year we had a $375,000 loss, and a couple years of $600,000 and $700,000 gains, in 1 year of $75,000. The excess money has been used up to pay for the police station. So, and if you look at the budget, the police and the paramedics is 38% of the budget. So as we go forward and look at our expenses, we're in good shape, but we do need to watch what we're doing, but we don't have the normal, what we've been doing, digging out of this hole of $1 million in the hole and looking later on down the year, the staff has got us to about a balance in the general fund, which spends approximately $11 million. So the staff has worked hard to get us to that point, and I want to commend them for it.
Just, Julie, I've got it, on the, it would be, it's the village, the expenditures by type, all funds, that page. I'm not looking to give you an additional project, because this one in itself is pretty big. But I think what would be interesting, is two things when I look at that. From the personnel side of it, the expenditures, is the unfortunate growth of that, of salaries and benefits that are there, how that has grown over the last few years versus what we've been actually able to do, right? The services that we provide. So I guess it would be interesting to know, just, I don't know, last 3 years, 4 years, that growth.
Okay.
And then the other part of that is, in that format, we always look to other communities, right? Of what are their percentages of their budgets going to personnel and benefits versus the services they provide. Does that make?
Right, because you can't,
Yeah, because we've talked about this, over and over again, that what we've done in the past is great, but we have some costs that are continuing to increase and increase by huge amounts, that we're having difficulty gaining, whether by increased revenues, right? There's only so much we can do, applying new fees or increasing rates. So that would be something to me that would just be interesting to know.
okay,
Okay.
you can do that.
And so that everyone understands how the police station is going now, we borrowed the money out of the general fund to put the police station up. So what our administration has done is now we're going to take that 900,000 approximate out of the general fund and pay it back to the gas. The police station is paid for. But you can really say that 900,000 came out of the $1.80,000 we've gained in the last 4 years. So we're good. We're out of debt. But now we have to sustain all the services we're having. And I just want to acknowledge that, so it's everything lined up this year that we could do this. We're not going to be able to pull that off every year. And Craig, with his road projects, we delayed, but we actually cut several road projects out. So no way did Craig get to do everything he wanted to this year because we don't have the funds. But we did pay for the police station. We don't have to borrow it this time. And the deficit we're talking about on the sewer, water, we've had all those meetings, what we need to spend the next 2 years on the water. I think it's 3 to 5, 17 million, I believe. For the next 10 years, we have reserves saved up, and we'll have increases in our funds from selling water, gas, and sewer. So hopefully, we won't have to borrow money to do those. But in our discussions with EPA and different ones, there are funds available, as we discussed, to borrow that money later on at a very low interest, if necessary. But it looks like and appears to me, over the next 10 years, we'll be picking different parts of each one of those and paying for them as we go. And that's why we got the reserve money. And the reserve money the citizens have paid in, and now we're required to do things in our water, to do things in our sewer, and we'll increase those and have it ready for the next 10, 20 years. So I think the staff has a handle on what needs to be done, what's the right thing to do. There's a lot of money in reserves to pay for a lot of that, but there will be decisions made for the next 10 years on which ones we do, which years. So I think that's a fair overview a little bit. Ken, you can add to if you like, on what our meeting was with the sewer, if you want. But I mean, we looked at a 10-year program of doing that. So when it comes to Craig here, he can allot. But I just wanted you to understand, we made a hard effort not to borrow money on the police because the rental on that will not pay that. So Julia's told me that the income that she as talked about, that $24,000 gain will go back to the general fund to help increase that general fund and put the money back in the general fund so the future boards have options to do things, because we are taking $900,000 out of that general fund. And if you look at that line, our beginning balance is $5.38 million, and she's projecting an end balance at $5.365. And I want you to know our accounting service and actuaries, they drill the mayor over that every year. When they do that, they look at that and they look at the end, and they think a town our size needs to have in reserves close to around $5 million. So again, Julie has kept us in that safe zone that they kind of require us to do, but yet paid the police station off. And I think hats off to the administration, Craig, Julie, everybody that's worked on this, because we're getting projects done, we're moving Morton forward, getting more blacktop down, but everything lined up with the motor fuel tax money that's been saved over the years and our gains on our general fund. So it's no time to think there's excess, but we've kept Morton in the black again with balanced expenditures and paying off new improvements. And remember, when you do spend money on the infrastructure, that is an asset. New roads, new buildings, when you give the appraisal of the property, you're not wasting money when you make improvements. All that is an asset. That asset has to be insured, and that's what villages have. So, you know, our net worth as a village goes up, but it's also what the citizens need. We need sewer lines working, we need water fresh, and there's new standards, and the staff's keeping up. All of you have been in several meetings on the water and sewer, so I'm not trying to talk here in length, but when we talk about the deficit of 5.7 million, that's really the long-term range over 10 years, a couple million in the water. So the money's there and there will be income, but we have to show it on the books. But really, we're debt-free and we're paying it. And some of you that have been here, we fought every year to get that last million out of the budget. This year, we don't have to do that. So, having said that, let's see who's next. You have any comments?
Yeah, we have, yeah.
Okay,
They
go
have more
ahead.
questions.
Well, we put it out
I
there.
almost threw the gauntlet.
Okay.
First thing, just a point of clarification on the sewer or water increase, that's 5% on each, right?
Yes.
5% on the
Yeah,
water
so
side,
total
5%
on your rate.
on the
And,
total,
and,
which way?
and we put that in there, Julie and myself, and we let you guys know. But obviously, we still got a lot more work to do. But I think we want to caution that our last rate increase was in 14. Seeing what we see now, in hindsight from 14, we've got to increase rates at some point to pay for these things. I don't like to compare a whole lot as far as a reason to increase rates, but I mean, I would say in the surrounding communities, that would be Metamora, Washington, Peoria, Pekin, and on average of those, I would say we're about 20% below the average. So that's not a reason necessarily to raise it, but I think it's kind of an indication of we got to increase our rates to pay for these things, because they're falling under the same situations that we are with their improvements that they have to make too. So a lot more to come to you guys with that, and that would be something you guys would approve, whether that be 5 to attach it to CPI. We want to lay that out, obviously see what those expenditures are, hone in a little more. We spent time on the wastewater. We need to spend a little more time on water treatment and kind of lay out when those projects are going to come and kind of back into that.
And then on the 911 consolidated fund, am I to understand then that basically we're saying there would be the 24,000 that would be remaining each year theoretically is after just the expenses for maintenance and utilities of the rented space?
Correct.
So, I mean, that's not the fee that we're paying back
Right.
to TC3 or whatever for our services.
Right.
So to me, something doesn't add up. $24,000 a year wouldn't even come close to paying a debt service on that facility that we're renting now to them.
Right.
I agree, because you're looking at like 900,000 and the fair market is somewhere around, right,
4%.
yeah, which you'd take a little bit more, but I think one of the things that we went into it, if you remember, was we wanted control, we wanted that here versus that being in another town. And so we are paying, like, that's the way I'm looking at it is while it's not necessarily a great deal monetarily, you're looking at it from the control aspect, I think is what.
But the
what we look at.
rates, the rental on that still should come closer to paying for that.
Well,
It
you
should be
have
more of a
to-
fair market, yeah, fair market would be the.
You have to remember the 900,000 is for the entire addition,
Right.
not just
Right,
the
that's
space.
right. Right.
we're
But
leasing.
even,
And
wasn't
there-
it like, isn't it like 650 or something for kind of the 911 portion?
I don't think so. I think it's probably closer to 160,000. We just,
For the, excuse me, for the
the-
911 portion or for the
the
balance?
ETSB, the Tazewell County's Emergency Telephone System Board, recently submitted an application for grants through the 911, through the state, and there was approximately 160,000. I give them several invoices that we had, and approximately 160,000 they could attribute to the actual dispatch portion of the project. So we're hoping that we can get those monies back in a grant, a portion of that, but, you know, we'll see.
That's still not the facility though, the brick and mortar that's over there, that we paid for to construct.
No, it's not, and it's unfortunate that we were good where we were at. We didn't have to add anything on, but to have that center here, and there was some things, as we, the ETSB, had a consultant come in, looked at everything. We were the only location of the existing, outside of the Pekin site, which did some remodel work there and expanded. But of Washington, East Peoria, and Morton, we were the only one that had an equipment room or server room large enough to accommodate everything that was needed for the dispatch center. Our facility was the only one that had the ability to expand itself. When we were constructed back in 2004, 2003-04, our east wall was made as a knockout wall for future expansion. We just didn't have any idea it would be 14 years later that we would be looking at that, but it had the ability to expand. Our investigation unit was displaced. We utilized, to expand the dispatch center, we had to go into where our investigators were, so we needed a new place for them. And no, the rental that we're going to get is not going to pay off that building.
Well, and again, I would not expect it to pay off the building in its entirety because there was more done than just what was needed to accommodate the consolidation. But to me, it seems like there's a big gap there. And the rental, I would think would come close to covering
Well,
what the debt service would have been on that amount.
without going too much into it, because I'll talk, it's
And he
a little
does,
bit over
and he
my
does.
area, but there are realtors out there that have looked at our facility and given us a estimated fair market value for what the rent is. And our legal counsel has drafted a potential lease agreement that has been given to the board for the TC3 to look at. They're probably going to come back with some type of a counter offer. It was given to them a week ago, and so they're in the process of looking at that with their legal counsel as well. And so I think Julie explained that what we have hoping to receive and what we think we're going to receive is somewhat on the both ends of the $14 that she's looking at for that. So I know what you're saying, that you would like to see it to come a little closer, but I I don't know that that's a realistic thing either because of what the fair market cost is that we can charge.
I've had
Do you have
legal
anything
counsel.
to add to that, Counselor?
Well, I'd just add that we're in negotiations with TC3, and our goal is to get the highest rent, provided we did insert a dispute resolution mechanism in the intergovernmental agreement, which provides if we can't agree with TC3 on rental terms, it'll go through a process where the rent's valued by appraisers, and we arrive at an appraiser-determined price. It's a challenging scenario for a lot of unique reasons to that specific property, including the fact that there isn't a lot of market comparables for exactly what was delivered to TC3. So, and be happy to provide more information on where things are. But I would say in general terms, we're engaging in our best efforts to get the best return for the village as a part of those negotiations. I think Julie's projection is fair for budgetary purposes. I certainly hope to achieve more, but I wouldn't, I wouldn't bank on it at this point.
And I've had Pat go to those meetings and take care of it. So,
I understand that, and I trust that you're all doing the best job you can to protect the village's interest.
and
But
we
I'm aware
You
of
have
the
the same-
agreement, and I know the conflict resolution that was incorporated. I agree on that. I've read all that stuff, and I know there's a process.
Still okay.
And ultimately, it's only gonna be what it's gonna be. But I'm just making a comment. It doesn't seem like it's.
But there is some gains. We had a new building to add on to. So if we're part of it and it's somewhere else and it's an old building, I've done it. I've done that kind of work. It could cost the taxpayers more money long term if we're added on to an old building and they didn't cover all the costs and there's expenditure. We got a brand new building to add on to that was designed that way. So long term for the citizens. Plus we gained an overhead door where if we had a serious crime, a car could be pulled in, locked in, and nobody's getting off.
No,
So-
well, and that's additions that were made
Right,
over and above
right.
what was
So-
necessary for the.
I still think like when it gets down to it, I know what you're saying of the 24,000. I mean, none of us sitting here would build something of that value, like in that space, and then only expect that amount of rent back.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, that's a fair statement. So the other part of it, one of the ways of understanding and justifying is that we do have control. It is here, and that's a good thing for Morton. Right. It's in our facility. It's better for us for a lot of reasons, even though there's some things.
And nobody's happy. I sat with two Washington councilmen. They had their facilities remodeled. We had a new one, and the state come in and says, "Boys, you gotta combine," and nobody's gaining from this.
Your Honor, in regards to going back to the conversation of the general fund, you had mentioned sustainability, of the fund, of how we're essentially have depleted, all the past surpluses that were realized. What are some of the risks that we're going to see, in the future going forward with possible increases of expenses?
I would say we're just going to have to be wise decision on what our goals are for each year. And we'll have to set some things aside like we do every year. It's not changing much. It's just that this year lined up that we could take some reserves out of motor fuel. We've learned in the last few years what the motor fuel can legally be used for. And we've projected out the two major projects would be paid for in cash. We can use the salt. That's 200,000. So that 200,000 of buying salt we just started doing a few years ago doesn't have to come out of the general fund. So we've made some great improvements, but it's just something that I think it'll be much easier for all six of you here when that balance is zero than digging out of $1 to $2 million, which I'm personally tired of doing.
No, and I can appreciate that. I don't think anyone wants to borrow money, and we don't want to go into debt. But like Trustee Harrod mentioned, we have seen increases, and he was asking more or less what's an exact increase that we've seen as far as an increase in like personnel services. We have seen significant growth. I mean, it's not impossible that we could see that climb continue to happen, and so it's becoming that much more important to. I wish we could say that we would see some more surpluses like that in the future, but it's probably nothing we would ever want to count on. So it's just we do run that risk, and I think it just probably hopefully goes without saying that we not just trying to be more careful about going forward, but I would almost say we should almost take some more protective measures, maybe seeing how we can almost decrease some of our costs. Because fact of life, if our money coming in is staying relatively flat, our expenses are going up, something's got to change. Especially if we're starting close to back to zero. None of us want to go into debt. None of us want to borrow money.
Right, but when I talk about the last year, 4 years growth, some people see where you make 600 one year and 700, and you think you have a lot of extra money to spend. I think you're going to see till this budget's done, we'll come out on the positive side again, but let's not get carried away to give that money away or spend it foolishly, because every couple of years there's something we need to do. So if we end up 300,000 to the positive, my hat's off to all of you that the staff has done a good job. And hopefully that's what's happened, because that's actually what's happened the last 2 years. We had deficit budgets, we ended up cutting some things and through it, and our road projects came in cheaper, and we had a 600,000 gain, a $700,000 gain. But 1 year we had a 375. And so we just got to watch those numbers, and we could have the next couple of years, if we conservatively do this, we could have another 500,000 in there. So we just got to, every year you're going to have to do that numbers, what you're going to spend it on. As far as personnel, I've been here several years, and I think we have one more person in the public works area, one, maybe two, over what it was years ago. And a lot of that is buy the technology and give the employees good equipment. We save training. And we've been doing that, and we got the technology. So in all due respect to all the staff across the board, that's very important, because that will save us money, and technology, it serves the citizens when we can answer everything. So I think we just have to be on top of all that, from meter readings, and we're going to have meter reading expenses coming up to all of you to look at, but I'll let Craig go into any of that. But so I think, to answer your question, the game hasn't changed. It's just we got a lucky break this year. The things tied in, but we've gotten those in the past. We just have to wisely move forward. And we're in a good place, because our business district has funds to do things, our tourism has funds. All those expenses can be paid for, whatever is in those budgets. Our general fund, everything can be paid for. So we're in a very good spot.
Do you think our conversations should be more about maintaining the budget, so to speak, or expenses, or should we even open up the conversation of how can we cut expenses?
I think we look at cutting every year, from cars to trucks to personnel. Do we need here or there? But I think you need to watch the general fund to stay around that, because that's kind of a guide if you can stay around that general fund number. But we're realists. We know what the insurance goes up, and we'll have to deal with those. But I don't know how else to answer it. It's like running a business. We got to watch the expenditures and the income. Like Julie said, if the state drops 300,000-400,000 we don't get, or if we don't get this 160 for 6 months, I'm telling you, we can spend 900,000, have it paid for, and maybe that 160 will come in, because the sales tax happened. That 1 year we had a fluke thing happened, and all of a sudden we got 300,000 more in sales tax. So I think Julie and the staff needs to do a good job to have the accurate numbers, which I think the general fund budget numbers are better than they've ever been in my 22 years. So we're doing a lot of things right, but let's not be crazy if that number shows a $300,000 profit and the general fund has 5.8 next year. We're gonna, U6 will have to decide what street projects and everything else we gotta do, what we hire, what we pay people.
I did have a comment.
Oh, well, good, I'm done. I don't know how else to say it. I just wanted to express, it's hard 4 years we put in with crazy inflation on medical, and you've all sat here through that, and we're to a point that we can pay for a police station. The staff has done a fabulous job.
And this really follows on the heels of those comments too. But I see one of the assumptions for the general fund is an increase in revenues of 1.9%. Is there anything you can speak to that specifically, or is that just purely on historical numbers, that increase? And then the other thing, maybe to the point of Trustee Lehman too, that, I think you're always doing that. You're cognizant of it, but if revenues don't result in what we'd anticipate, is there some scenario planning or maybe itemized listing of things that we need to be aware of that do need to, instead of having to react and adapt at that time? Is there some, if revenues aren't coming in as we anticipate, and we know that in this world, this day and time, crazy things happen, and the condition of our own state, many factors, many extenuating circumstances are out there, and so I'm just, I appreciate the hard work that you've done in this, and I don't want to rain on the parade here with all the hard work that you've done on it, but I just want to touch on that point as well, that down the road, should things not look as rosy as we anticipate or hope for.
Well, one of the things that I mentioned that's in this budget is a replacement of an ambulance unit. Joe Kelly and I discussed this. This isn't something that has to be done tomorrow. However, generally how this works is you pay for an ambulance and then you wait a year to get it. This is unit's 15 years old that we're looking to replace.
And you pay for that up front. You don't,
Right.
you don't pay for it
up
at time of
front.
possession. So
Right.
we may
And
wait a
so-
year to get it, but we're paying for it this year if we
Correct.
do it.
And so there's room in the budget to purchase one for this year. And I think it's not a stupid mistake, to do it, because you never know with something that's 15 years old. We have a great mechanic staff that maintain our vehicles for us. I don't think we could operate like we do without those two gentlemen, but you keep putting parts on a piece, and eventually it's going to become something that's going to come up that it's going to cost more to fix than is worth
It's
fixing.
not under 100,000 miles is what you're saying.
Right.
No.
And I think
240.
I would mention, it's been our goal for as long as I can remember, that to have those units last 15 years. I mean, that is what we go into it assuming that life cycle will be. So, I mean, we don't, and we buy substantial ambulances. They're not cheap ambulances, but it's because we want them to last for 15 years. We could buy things that are cheaper and have them last for 5 years and buy 3 times as many. So, we prefer it to have them out there and be dependable.
And trust,
We're not looking at this is the third unit, correct? We don't just maintain 2 units because we always have 2 units on duty. So this is the third unit that is used, like if one of them has to go in for service, this one's used in that interim. So the oldest of the 3 that we have, if we purchase a new one, the oldest will become the spare unit, if you want to call it that, and be used only as needed. So this is to replace that unit.
but Trustee Belser, you brought up 2 things. I asked the staff to come closer than ever because I'm a realist, because of the state of Illinois' condition. If any of these numbers fall off, we need to be close to 0, not digging out of $1 million like we have in the past. So the staff did that. The ambulance, I spoke with Ryan, the mechanic, NAS first. I had him contact the chief. That particular one had a new motor a year or 2 ago. It could probably make it, but I asked him to work on a number because maybe we need to stick to the 15, or maybe we get a year more out of it. We'll be deciding that as we come, but they've been getting us numbers, and the chief got us a number so we could put it in the budget, because we thought we'd rather be 15 over than 240 under, because we'd rather buy the ambulance when we can afford to have it. We don't know what next year brings, and it is 15 years old. So we got it in there. In the next few months, you'll be looking at that expenditure, deciding whether we're going to go. But our mechanic went through that a few years back, and he would prefer not going there. So we'll weigh all that in.
And you discussed revenues in this budget. There's a $120,000 increase in property taxes in this budget compared to the current fiscal year.
Okay.
That's due to how we are levying for our retirement funds. There was sufficient levying space, if you want to call it that I increased the general fund levy by $120,000. That's not going to be an every year thing. There's also, I anticipated only $60,000 increase in sales tax, income tax, all that put together. It's pretty conservative look at that, but the general, the budget proposal that was put down by the governor is to maintain where they've been taking 5% more of our, what they call the local government distribution fund of income taxes. That's, when they did it last year, they said it would only be for 1 year, but that's being extended another year.
Shocker.
Yeah, those
Sorry.
things, probably
Is that
when the
allowed?
budget gets worked on, there will be more of that than less. So I was pretty conservative in numbers wise.
And the history is we're always conservative on the income. So trustee Lehman, when we're closer to zero, in 6 months, 4 months, Julie can give us a closer feel for where we're at for income, expenses. I think it's going to be much easier to know what we're really doing instead of waiting the last 3 months.
I would think, Randy, you would probably echo this too, that one of the things that that they do a really nice job, when I say they, Craig and Julie and the others, is that overestimating some of the expenses is probably where the cushion comes from, not really the underestimating the revenues is one way to give your cushion. Probably one of the bigger ones that they've done, that we have seen, or I've seen in the last 6 years, and you guys a little bit more, is the overestimation of some of the expenses. The issue is that I always see going forward is, dialing that in is going to be really important. But then for the people sitting up here, when you actually have not necessarily a mistake, but the unforeseen, that it actually goes up instead of it going down. Like you said, the street overlay, right? We had a budget done, had so many miles set for it, and then our bid prices came in significantly lower than what we thought they were going to be, right? Well, there's going to be a year where that's not going to work, and where that's at, I'm not sure you can plan for that exactly, but you kind of got to do both to give some buffer, and some really hard choices are going to have to start being made. I mean, that's really what this comes down to, is that there's going to be some hard choices that are going to have to be made. It's either going to be services are cut, fees are going to go up, services are going to be cut, projects aren't going to be done, vehicles and equipment aren't going to be bought and going to be pushed off. That's what the hard work is about, that of making choices and trying to figure out what's the best thing to do. I don't know that we can sit here and have that discussion now, but that's what you're up against,
Okay.
And you just it's a journey. There's no freaking finish line. You're just going to keep doing it every year, every month. Right? That's just the
But the
way it is.
positive is we're balanced right
Yeah,
now,
that's
and
right.
everything's paid for. So,
Yes, it's just going to be a continuous process for you guys. So, thank you.
okay. Chief of Police. Short and sweet.
I have nothing this evening.
Thank
Your
you.
Honor.
Corporation Counsel.
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
All right, Director of Fire Emergencies.
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
We've talked about your ambulance enough. Okay. All right, Director of Public Works, you can finish any comments on this,
Yeah, I
and
had
then go
one
to your
comment.
next one.
You wouldn't call on me as I raised my
I
hand.
know. I just wanted everybody, this is a golden opportunity to understand this budget.
I just wanted to speak on behalf, Past Board, the village has done a great job, me being here in the time I have, with our enterprise funds, the gas fund, the stormwater fund that's been there for 12 years. These are things that offset the costs, of the general fund. So when we're out plowing with 9 trucks, that's all we have, we're plowing with a wastewater truck. We're plowing with a gas truck. My salary, Julie's salary, we prorate that salary so that the general fund only takes that portion of it. So when you start really even looking at personnel, not really a lot, on the personnel side. So I think you guys are right that, it's services, but Morton's done a great job for many years on preventative maintenance. That's the challenge. When do you make new? When do you replace things? But I just want to speak on behalf of all of our enterprise funds. Even when we raise water rates, you're still going to get that 5% of that goes back to the general fund as increased revenue there. So I just want to point that out, that seeing it from my level, that is a tremendous a thing that we have here that a lot of other communities don't. You go to Peoria, every one of those plow trucks is coming out of the general fund. There's no other funding mechanism to help pay for those things. So I just wanted to add that.
Well, I got one thing to add too. Because of our utilities, that we sell so much of gas and everything, our 5% tax that we go into the general fund is $1,130,000 goes from those utilities. So when the taxpayers pay their water bill, their gas bill, all that, the corporations here, the car dealers, wash your cars, that all that goes 1.13 million into the general fund so that we can break even. So when we get business coming here and have building tax, property tax, but if we can sell them gas, water, and the services, all those reserve funds build up, and that's what's going to pay for this infrastructure. So we have a good infrastructure. Now we need to bring business, use up some of this ground around us, and bring things here. And we're in a good, very good spot. Now we have to do the work and bring them here.
Yeah, so like stormwater utilities, another one. I got an email today from another town. Towns are starting to implement this. I mean, we would be behind by $15 million if we wouldn't have started that in '06.
And the stormwater
And
pays
we
for
use that, and that pays for a portion of the projects, curb and gutter, manholes, inlets, those sort of things.
and the street sweeper
And the street sweeper.
with $250,000 paid out of the stormwater. So, okay?
But streets are always going to be a challenge. That's something that I've sent a lot of you guys information. I look forward every year having that discussion. I realize that's probably the biggest flexible item there. And we're trying to stay ahead as best we can and trying to be creative with streets. But we'll have to continue to be creative, and that's going to be a challenge as we go forward.
And probably the most visible.
And the most visible.
And the complain and everything else too.
But we are the envy of communities around. Our infrastructure's up there. Okay. Hey, you want to go on to your next project?
With that, yes, my next item's about streets. So, in front of you is item A, this is resolution for maintenance under the Illinois Highway Code appropriating $1,560,000 of motor fuel tax funds for 2019 MFT projects.
Could I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any comments? Want to add anything to that?
In front of you, I had a packet here that kind of showed the streets. Pat Myers helped me on some of our overlay this year. He's in the audience. He put this together just to kind of separate which streets we're doing. I've sent you a list of them too, but so this will just go to IDOT to appropriate the funds to get approval for that. We'll still come to you after we put them out for bid for ultimate approval of those streets.
All right. Any other comments? Call the roll.
Hare.
Yes.
Lehman.
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
Parrot.
Yes.
Belsley.
Yes.
Blunier.
Yes.
Motion passes.
And I would like to add one thing with that. I intend to send letters out tomorrow and this week for these projects. I know today was the first reading of the budget, but we want to get going and letting the public know that we're planning to come their way. So that stuff will be going out if anyone gets any questions.
All right. Thank you. Planning and zoning, Roger has 6 or 7.
A through G.
It's
not that bad.
Right. So the council has told me if Roger will explain them, we could pass them all in one motion. So why don't we have Roger explain each one? And then maybe after each one, if you have a question, we'll ask it. And if we can go through all 7, maybe we'll save a little time, and then I'll have more time to talk at the end. No, I'm just teasing. Okay, Roger. The floor is yours.
Okay. The first item that you have before you is ordinance 19-22, and it's regarding pavement setbacks. And really, we're not changing anything on pavement setbacks. The only thing we're doing is reorganizing our the Title 10 of our zoning ordinance to make it more user-friendly, is how I would word it. So we're taking these changes that we see, they were all listed in Chapter 4 under general regulations. Well, if you're the person wanting to do a job in a B2 zoning district, let's say, and you want to know what those setbacks are, you don't look in B2. You had to go up in the front of the book and look under the general regulations. So we're making it'll be more user-friendly. The industrial setbacks will be in industrial zoning and Chapter 7 and so forth. So, like I said, none of the setbacks are changing. It's just how it's going to be positioned in our ordinance book.
Any questions? Next.
19-23 is pertaining to breweries, wineries, and what we have nobody in mind for these right now. We've had people inquire in the past. We thought it might be good to get ahead of the game here and have this ordinance in place. It's, you'll see some definitions, and it tells what each of these are. And then item B, it's under special uses. So these will all be special use permits, which will be a public hearing held at the Plan Commission with a recommendation forwarded on to you to make a final decision on. So none of these are going to happen without your blessing.
Any questions? Next.
19-25. Solar system, what we were doing is cleaning up when we adopted our previous solar ordinance back several months. There were a couple items that were in the old code that kind of didn't jive with what the new ordinance, so we just removed them totally. We're not changing our existing solar ordinance at all. It is what you adopted. Nothing changed. We're just cleaning it up.
Any questions? I think the one before was political signs we skipped.
Did I miss? Okay, the political signs would have been 24. Thank you. We had an ordinance, the way it was written before, it had the words, unless they are on property zoned residential, you didn't have to remove the political signs after the election. If it was in industrial property, you had to, so we're just making it all the same now. After the election, the signs have to come down 7 days.
Any questions? Next.
I'll move on. Accessory structures. What this change amounts to is the current code allows you to have 2 accessory structures on your property. So you could have that could be a swimming pool, a gazebo, a pergola, a patio, a deck, but 2 only. But it also, in that ordinance, it tells you that you can't occupy more than 60% of your backyard. The main thing we're trying to do is so someone doesn't roof and pave their whole yard, because then that creates a problem down here for Craig on stormwater when everything's impervious and it doesn't work. The subdivisions aren't laid out to accept that type of water. So by changing this ordinance, though, all we're doing is, we had a case where someone had a number of different things in their backyard. They did not exceed the 60%, and everything looked great. So when Craig and I had met with them, we got to thinking, well, what does it matter how many of these you have if you can't go over that 60% threshold? So it gives people the opportunity to have like a pool, a gazebo, and maybe even a covered structure over one of these outdoor kitchens like they have now. People want the outside of their house now, their backyard, I guess you could say, to be an extension of the inside of their house. So that's what this change is. We're not removing that 60%. We're not going to be flooding the neighbors. So,
But you also kept part of the existing verbiage there that even though you could have unlimited number, you can't have 2
2
identical.
storage buildings, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
which, we don't want it to look like a
You don't
mini
want,
storage.
yeah, little.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Belsley.
Yeah,
I
good
didn't
point.
want someone to get the idea that you put multiple accessory storage buildings out there in the backyard.
We have plenty of mini storage facilities
Yeah.
in Morton, that's right.
Okay.
Any questions on that
Craig,
one?
you got a comment?
I talked to Roger before, I support the accessory use, obviously I worked with Roger, but while we talk about the 60%, and I think that's good now, but down the road, and I mentioned to Roger, we continue to densify these properties, even the 60%, with more impervious, which continues to lead to more drainage issues. I could probably poll you guys right here today, and I'd say a majority have some drainage issues in their yards. We get a lot of questions, comments, so I think that's something down the road I'd like to work with Roger on, and maybe look at the whole lot and just do kind of an assessment of where we're at going forward, and maybe look at the entire lot and determine what % of the entire lot can be impervious or pervious. Really doesn't have anything to do necessarily with our stormwater policy, but as a general understanding of our stormwater policy, it was based on quarter impervious and 3/4 pervious. Impervious being paved or roof, and pervious being, grass. So even our stormwater policy isn't keeping up with what we're doing these subdivisions. So I think we're seeing more and more. We support it. It's more livable, but I think at some point, some of these lots still need a bigger lot for all the things they want to do. So 60% is of the rear yard, correct? But
The actual rear yard.
that still may contribute over the whole lot still as fairly high. I would think 66%, I've looked at a few, is too high. We do have some of those, which I would say that there's probably some drainage concerns when those things are done. So I just want to add that
Well, let's
looking
try to have that
forward-
done by the end of September.
Yeah, exactly, before
We
Roger's
will.
gone. And then with that, one thing we've talked about is roof downspouts, yard piping. We try to handle that on a case by case. There is some stuff in the ordinance, and starting to look at something there to put in the ordinance, of keeping that at half the setback or something, to try to take care of some of your drainage on your own site as opposed to trying to pipe it onto the neighbor. We try to control that on a case by case, but, or permit by permit, but it still is tough to deal with.
Any other questions? So you'll take care of that before the end of September, Raj? You
Oh,
and
yeah.
Craig? Thank you. All right, next.
The last one is 19-27. And basically, all we're doing is adding balconies, decks, and patios to our existing language of how far something can project into a side or rear yard. We allowed you to do a lot of things. We just didn't happen to say those things. And it'll help somebody build an apartment complex that has some small balconies. They're only 5 foot deep, but they do project 3 foot into the required front yard or rear yard.
Any questions?
Just curious on this one. This is for future construction, but do we have any situations that would cause existing buildings to be non-conforming because of this, that we're aware of? Or we're not putting a
Not that I'm
hardship, I guess what I'm saying is, we're not putting a hardship on someone.
No, I don't think so. We're going to
Okay.
actually make it, I think we're going to make it easier for someone moving forward, though.
Okay.
Pat, would you agree?
Yeah, this standard is less restrictive than what's in the code, so you
Yes.
are relaxing a standard as opposed to making it
Okay.
restrictive.
Any questions on this?
Any questions?
I do have a question regarding the limitations with the, 60% of the lot of impervious and impervious. I sat through the other meeting where, these all sounded good, but you've got me curious now. If this is something that we need to revisit, we probably should do it sooner more than later, because once changes are made, it's hard to reverse things.
Yeah, and I think we're not changing anything here what's now. I'm just looking down the road, but yeah, I think this is something we could discuss sooner than later.
Well, I'm one that suffers from poor drainage, and I don't want anybody else
Aware
to
of that.
be faced with that, so. But I'll be happy to talk with you about it, Roger.
And some of that's related to our soil types, our Morton's flat. There's a lot of issues between neighbors and backyard drainage and all that.
Do we need to go over G, the zone,
I'm sorry?
the zoning map provision?
You have one more. the zoning
Yes.
map.
I didn't know if you were going to vote on this.
Okay, on these 6, if there's no other questions, can we have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the A through F through all 6 of those.
I second.
Any other comments? Call the roll.
Lehman.
Yes.
Newman.
Yes.
Parrot.
Yes.
Belsley.
Yes.
Blunier.
Yes.
Hare.
Yes.
Motion
The
passes.
last item was, in your agendas were the list, is a list that shows the zoning map changes. These are all things that would have been approved by the board here, be it a rezoning or special use, subdivision, plat approval, annexations. They're all here. Those will show up if you click on one of our maps online. You'll be able to see each of those. Any questions?
If not, do any of the village trustees have anything to make? If not, can I have a motion to close?
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.